Most women are told that if they give enough, love enough, bend enough, a man will need them. But that is the greatest illusion of all. The truth is, the more you contort yourself to be chosen, the less he feels compelled to hold you. A man does not need what is always chasing. He needs what he cannot quite possess, yet cannot live without. Have you ever wondered why some women seem to occupy a man's mind like a haunting melody present even in silence, unforgettable even in absence? It isn't beauty alone, nor kindness, nor the endless sacrifices made in the name of love. It is something deeper, something archetypal, something woven into the fabric of psychology itself. A man does not awaken into obsession because of surface gestures. He awakens when a woman moves through thresholds that stir the ancient forces of his unconscious. Carl Jung spoke of the anima, the feminine soul within every man that shapes his desires, fears, and longings. When he encounters a woman who mirrors this inner image, she becomes more than herself in his eyes. She becomes the reflection of his own depths. Yet here lies the paradox. The more she clings to him, the more she collapses into dependency, the more that reflection shatters. Need is not born from overgiving. It is born when a woman dares to embody her wholeness. Imagine this: a man meets a woman who does not anxiously hover around his presence, but stands rooted in her own world, radiant with self-possession. She does not beg for his attention because she already has her own. She does not surrender her boundaries to his moods because her worth is not negotiable. She is not cruel, nor dismissive, but she is untouchable in one crucial way. Her sense of self remains intact, whether he stays or goes. That unshakable center becomes the first psychological threshold. This threshold is not arrogance, it is individuation. The woman who has confronted her shadows, who has walked through her pain instead of projecting it onto him, is no longer a prisoner of his validation. Her energy shifts. She becomes both mystery and sanctuary, a paradox he cannot resolve. The Stoics would call this the fortress of the soul, a place where no external storm can intrude. And men, whether they realize it or not, are drawn to that fortress because it awakens both fear and desire, fear of losing it, desire to enter it. But every threshold creates tension. The man who has always been fed by easy devotion feels the sting of her distance. He may resist, he may test, he may accuse her of being cold. Yet beneath that reaction lies something else, an awakening hunger. He begins to sense that this woman will not dissolve into him, and that truth unsettles his ego while igniting his unconscious. What he thought he wanted: control, comfort, reassurances, not what he needs. He needs the challenge that sharpens his spirit. The second psychological threshold reveals itself when she dares to mirror his own shadow back to him. Not through blame, not through loud confrontation, but through the quiet mirror of authenticity. She does not participate in his games. She does not carry his wounds for him. Instead, she reflects them with calm clarity. And though it may provoke defensiveness, something deeper stirs. The recognition that she sees him more honestly than he sees himself. That recognition is terrifying, yet irresistible. This is the moment where attraction deepens into a psychological bond. A man may run from it, but he cannot forget it. For to be seen in both his light and his shadow is to feel naked in a way no casual connection can replicate. Here the Jungian principle comes alive. Only through facing his shadow can a man grow, and the woman who holds that mirror without collapsing into resentment becomes unforgettable. She is no longer just a partner, she is an initiator of transformation. Yet, Even this threshold is not the final one, for there is a third, and it is the most dangerous, the most liberating. It is when she no longer fears his absence, when she understands fully that love cannot be sustained through clinging, but only through freedom. This is the threshold that terrifies the masculine psyche, because it dismantles the old illusion that a woman needs him more than he needs her. When she stands in that freedom, she does not become careless, she becomes sovereign. She becomes the woman who can walk away without bitterness, whose silence can echo louder than words. It is then, in that final threshold, that a man awakens to his deepest realization. She does not need him to survive, but he needs her to feel alive. And so, the journey begins, not in the pursuit of his affection, but in the reclamation of her own essence. For the woman who dares to walk through these psychological thresholds is no longer just a lover in his eyes. She becomes the axis around which his unconscious turns, the presence he cannot erase, the one he needs, not because she gives endlessly, but because she embodies the rarest truth. She is whole unto herself. A man may resist this truth, yet he cannot escape it. His conscious mind will argue, his pride will rebel, but his unconscious recognizes when it has encountered something extraordinary. The woman who does not flinch, who does not collapse into dependency, unsettles the foundations of his ego. At first, he may label it as difficulty, mystery, or even coldness. But what he truly feels is the magnetic pull of individuation, for she represents the path he himself has not yet walked. Think of it like standing before a vast mountain. Most turn away, choosing the comfort of the valley, the predictability of flat ground. Yet the mountain stands, silent, immovable, offering no shortcut. A man sees this in her presence, an ascent he cannot master, yet cannot ignore. His spirit, wired for challenge, begins to long for the climb, not because she demands it, but because her very being calls it forth. She becomes both the summit and the storm that surrounds it. This threshold of sovereignty transforms attraction into necessity. A woman who belongs to herself cannot be easily replaced. Others may echo beauty, others may offer devotion, but none can replicate the electric tension between independence and intimacy that she embodies. It is this paradoxa, willingness to connect while never surrendering her selfhood, that begins to reshape the man's internal architecture. His anima image, once fragmented, begins to align through her. She embodies the eternal feminine archetype, not as fantasy, but as reality that demands his growth, and growth is never gentle. To a man accustomed to being the center of gravity, her refusal to orbit him feels like rejection. He may rage, withdraw, or attempt to pull her back into the old dance of need and appeasement, but each attempt fails, because she does not play the role of rescuer. She has faced her own shadows and will not carry his. She will stand beside him, but she will not stand beneath him. The Stoics wrote that freedom is not the absence of attachment, but the mastery of it. This woman embodies such mastery. She can love without grasping, give without erasing, and walk away without crumbling. Her love is a choice, not a contract written in desperation. And so, paradoxically, the man feels her presence as oxygen precisely because she withholds the suffocating air of dependency. He begins to realize that without her, the room feels emptier, life feels duller, and his own reflection less vivid. Here we arrive at the subtle danger. The threshold that awakens his need can also awaken his resistance. Not every man is ready to face the mirror she holds, nor climb the mountain she represents. Some will shrink back, seeking women who will orbit their gravity instead. And yet, then they do not forget her. For once a man has tasted the fire of individuation through a woman's sovereignty, no lesser connection feels the same. She has carved an imprint on his psyche, a reminder of what real intimacy demands. This is why silence becomes one of her greatest weapons. Not silence born of manipulation, but silence born of power. When she does not chase, when she does not fill every void with explanation, the absence becomes a presence. He begins to feel the weight of his own longing. He begins to realize that her energy was never guaranteed, that her world continues even without him. That realization unsettles him more than any argument ever could at this point. His choices narrow. Either rise into a higher form of connection or retreat into old patterns. But whichever he chooses, the threshold has already been crossed. The woman has set the standard, not through words, not through ultimatums, but through her very way of being. This is the alchemy of female empowerment, not as slogan, but as lived reality. She no longer negotiates her worth. She embodies it, and in doing so, she transforms the very dynamic of desire. No longer is it about appeasing him, no longer about molding herself into his needs. It is about standing so firmly in her essence that he must decide whether to meet her there or lose her entirely. And that decision, once placed in his hands, becomes unbearable, for he senses the truth. She does not need him to survive, but he cannot imagine surviving without the light she brings. It is in this crucible of tension between independence and intimacy that true need is forged. The man is no longer driven by shallow attraction, but by something deeper. The recognition that she awakens him, challenges him, and anchors him in ways no one else has. His pride may resist it, but his soul longs for it. And so he stands before her, not as conqueror, but as seeker. And here lies the secret that most never grasp. A man does not need the woman who bends herself into his mold. He needs the woman who disrupts it. His spirit craves not the one who erases herself to soothe him, but the one who forces him to confront what he has avoided. Desire without disruption dies quickly. But when a woman embodies thresholds that awaken his unconscious, he experiences her not merely as a partner, but as a catalyst of transformation. This catalytic presence is never loud, never frantic. It radiates through the way she carries herself, through the subtle refusal to collapse into his storms. If he lashes out, she does not retaliate with equal chaos. If he withdraws, she does not chase blindly. She maintains her axis, and in doing so, he feels the quiet but unshakable truth. Her world will not crumble without him. That realization both terrifies and compels him. Carl Jung once observed that the deepest encounters between people are those that awaken both light and shadow. The anima does not only draw a man toward his ideals of beauty and tenderness, it also drags him into confrontation with his wounds, his immaturities, his fears of abandonment. The woman who embodies sovereignty forces these layers to the surface, sometimes without speaking a word. Her very presence is enough to unmask the boy still hidden within the man. At first, this exposure feels unbearable. He may accuse her of being too demanding, too elusive, too independent. But deep within, he knows she is not punishing him, she is revealing him. He feels the sting of his own incompleteness, and instead of despising her for it, he becomes tethered to her presence, for she alone awakens him in this way. This tether is not chains. It is the unconscious recognition that she mirrors the man he is meant to become. In Stoic philosophy, They speak of the role of adversity in shaping character. To Seneca, the storm was not an enemy, but a teacher. Likewise, the empowered woman becomes the storm that tests his sails. If he can withstand her strength without attempting to diminish it, he becomes stronger. If he flees from it, he remains weak. Thus, his need for her becomes a need not merely for her affection, but for the strength she evokes within him. Without her, he risks drifting back into mediocrity. Yet this need carries with it a dangerous paradox. For the same force that makes him long for her can also make him fear losing her. He becomes vigilant, alert, unsettled by the possibility that she may walk away, and indeed, she can. Her power lies in that freedom. Unlike many who cling to a relationship as their sole source of identity, she holds no such chains. She can choose to stay, but she can just as easily choose to go. This is what makes her rare. This is what makes her unforgettable. Some men, confronted with this power, attempt to reassert control. They test her boundaries, trying to lure her back into old games of insecurity. But every time she refuses to crumble, every time she honors her own worth, their tests lose power. He may not admit it aloud, but within him, admiration begins to rise. She has done what few ever dare. She has proven that her love is not rooted in fear, and this shifts everything. He begins to associate her not with neediness, but with strength, not with dependency, but with choice. She becomes a presence he cannot categorize, a mystery he cannot solve. And it is this very impossibility that makes him need her all the more. For men are not captivated by what is easily grasped, they are haunted by what escapes them, yet calls them back again and again. The final irony is this: the more she refuses to surrender her essence, the more he feels he must rise to meet her. She does not drag him upward. She stands where she is and demands he climb. If he does, the bond deepens into something unbreakable. If he does not, the distance grows, and she will walk away. But either way, she remains free. And in that freedom, her power is complete. This is the psychological landscape where true need is born not in the easy comforts of compliance, but in the fire of challenge and mystery. The woman who embodies these thresholds becomes not just a partner, but a myth in his psyche, a story he cannot stop telling himself. Even in her silence, she echoes. Even in her absence, she lingers. And so, though she may not need him, he comes to realize that he cannot imagine himself without her. There comes a moment when a man begins to recognize the shift. What once felt like a simple connection now feels like gravity itself, pulling him toward her no matter how he resists. He may try to rationalize it, to convince himself that it is mere attraction or habit. But deep inside, he knows it is something far more profound. She has become a threshold in his psyche, a gate he cannot pass through without being changed. And though his pride may fight it, his soul leans toward her with a hunger he cannot silence. This is the strange paradox of sovereignty. The more she stands apart, the more he feels compelled to move closer. He senses that her love is not endless. Currency to be spent recklessly, it is a rare gift, offered only to the worthy. This rarity transforms everything. What is scarce becomes sacred, and what is sacred awakens devotion. She is no longer one option among many. She is the measure against which all others fail. Here, the imagery of the archetype sharpens. She becomes the queen archetype, not because she demands crowns and thrones, but because she rules herself. She does not need his protection, though she welcomes his presence. She does not require his approval, though she respects his essence. She lives in alignment with her own values, her own rhythms, her own truth. In this way, she embodies what Jung described as individuation, the soul's journey into wholeness. And the man, though he may not have the words for it, feels this wholeness as irresistible. But every ascent requires a test. He will be confronted by his own inadequacies, by the boy within who still fears rejection and loss. When she refuses to rescue him from these fears, he may crumble, accuse, or retreat. Yet the truth is clear. She does not abandon him, but neither does she shield him from his own reflection. In this crucible, he must decide whether to rise as a man or remain as a child. The tension between these two selves is what fuels his need for her, because she is not just a lover, she is a mirror. She reflects his unhealed wounds, his suppressed desires, his potential for greatness, and no matter how much he tries to escape, no other woman will reflect him in the same way. The dance becomes archetypal, timeless. The anima within him seeks completion, and she embodies the form that calls him toward it. He senses that without her, he will drift back into fragmentation. With her, though the path is difficult, he glimpses the possibility of becoming whole. This is why her silence cuts deeper than her words. Her absence becomes a teacher, forcing him to sit with his own emptiness. He cannot numb it with distractions for long, because the echo of her presence lingers. Unlike others, she does not tether herself to his moods. She withdraws with grace, and in that withdrawal, she forces him to confront the void inside, and so his need for her becomes not just emotional but existential. She represents the difference between stagnation and evolution. The Stoics might say that she has mastered the art of detachment, and through that mastery, she frees him to see the truth. Love, as Marcus Aurelius would remind, cannot thrive in the chains of control. It flourishes only where freedom reigns. Her freedom destabilizes him at first, but ultimately, it is the very thing that deepens his desire. For he begins to realize that the love she offers is unlike any other. It is not born of fear, not sustained by manipulation, but anchored in her wholeness. And yet, this very strength demands that he step into his own. He cannot coast, cannot lean endlessly on her. She will not carry both souls. She demands through her presence never, her pleading that he learn to carry himself. And in this demand, she becomes indispensable, not because she feeds his ego, but because she awakens his spirit. The man who has encountered such a woman cannot return to the hollow comforts of superficial love. He has seen too much, felt too deeply, been too undone. Thus, the thresholds become clear. The threshold of her sovereignty, the threshold of her mirror, and the threshold of her freedom. Each one strips away his illusions and confronts him with himself. And though this process may terrify him, it also binds him, for he knows that what she awakens is rare, and without her, his life risks becoming ordinary again. And once a man has glimpsed the extraordinary, he can never return to contentment with the shallow. This is why she becomes unforgettable, not because of tricks or strategies, not because of games or rehearsed allure, but because she dares to be whole. She dares to be herself, and in doing so, she awakens the deepest truth within him, that he does not merely want her, he needs her, for through her he meets both his shadow and his light, and without her, he feels the weight of incompletion pressing against his soul. The deeper he sinks into this realization, the more he understands that what binds him to her is not comfort, but transformation. Comfort fades, but transformation lingers. He cannot explain it logically, because it does not obey the language of reason. It speaks in symbols, in dreams, in the strange pull of the unconscious. Her presence stirs both the man he is and the man he is becoming, and in this tension, he finds himself unable to walk away. She is both mirror and muse, storm and sanctuary, and yet she never abandons her center. While he wrestles with the pull of his own anima, she continues her path of individuation. She is not waiting at the threshold for him to catch up. She is already walking, already becoming, already deepening into her own mystery. This is why his need sharpens, because he feels the urgency of her movement. She is not a stagnant pool waiting for his reflection. She is a river, flowing, untouchable, and eternal. To lose her would be to lose the current that propels him toward his own growth. This dynamic awakens something archetypal in him. He begins to sense that her value is not transactional, is transcendent. She cannot be bargained with or owned, for she belongs first to herself. In mythology, she resembles the goddess who grants initiation only to those who dare enter the labyrinth. Knowing full well the danger of the minotaur within, she is both guide and gatekeeper, and in her presence he is forced to confront the wildness of his own psyche. That confrontation binds him, for it is through her that he faces what he cannot face alone. But this is no easy road for her. The empowered woman must also endure the weight of being misunderstood. Many will call her detached, distant, or unyielding. Some men will retreat from her presence altogether, unwilling to endure the discomfort she evokes. Yet her strength lies in not collapsing under their projections. She knows that to surrender her essence for approval would be to betray her very soul. And so, she continues patient, but unmoved, allowing only those strong enough to meet her where she stands. It is in this crucible that the rarest bond emerges, for when a man chooses to step into the thresholds she represents, something extraordinary unfolds. His desire for her is no longer shallow, craving it becomes devotion. Not the devotion of blind worship, but the devotion of recognition. He begins to understand that her value is not in how she soothes him, but in how she awakens him, and in that awakening, he feels the truth. She is not merely a companion to his life. She is the fire that keeps his soul from growing cold. The Stoics would remind us that no external person should control the fortress of our peace. Yet in paradox, it is often through another that we discover our truest nature. This woman, sovereign and whole, does not control him, but she reveals him. And in that revelation, he feels his dependence, not on her validation, but on the growth she evokes within him. He begins to realize that without her, he may never climb the mountain of his own potential. With her, he at least has the chance. This realization shifts his orientation toward love itself. No longer does he seek mere possession, for possession is impossible with her. He seeks communion. He seeks alignment. He seeks to stand not above her, not beneath her, but beside her. For she has taught him, without saying a word, that only in equality can love survive the storms of time. The boy in him craves ownership, but the man in him craves partnership, and she is the threshold through which he must pass to find it. And so his need becomes existential, not because she fills a void he cannot fill, but because she refuses to be the balm for his wounds. She forces him to face himself, to grow into his own fullness. And in that process, she becomes necessary not in the way water is necessary to the thirsty, but in the way light is necessary to the one trapped in darkness. Without her, he remains half-formed. With her, he moves closer to wholeness. But for her, the path remains the same. She does not bend to secure his devotion, nor does she dim her fire to ease his fears. She continues forward, embodying sovereignty, reflecting shadow and living in freedom. Whether he follows or not, her essence remains intact. And this, more than anything, is what seals his need. The knowledge that she is complete without him, and that her presence in his life is a choice, not a dependency. In that choice lies the deepest power. For the woman who chooses rather than chases becomes the axis around which love turns. She does not beg, she does not demand, she simply is. And her very being is enough to unravel his ego and awaken his soul. That is the true threshold, the one that makes him realize that needing her is not weakness, but the beginning of his own becoming. There is a certain terror that creeps into a man's chest when he realizes she could live without him. It is not the fear of abandonment as he knew it in childhood, nor the insecurity born of jealousy. It is deeper, more primal, the recognition that she is whole unto herself. That recognition destabilizes the part of him that has been conditioned to believe women need men more than men need women. Now he stands before a reality that flips the script. He is the one who cannot imagine life without her. This shift is not merely emotional, it is archetypal. She has stepped fully into the role of the sovereign feminine, embodying what Jung described as the complete anima, the guide who both wounds and heals, who destroys illusions while awakening truth. In myth, she is the enchantress who both and transforms, the figure who draws him into the underworld of his own psyche and then points toward rebirth. Without her, he remains in the shallows of his existence. With her, he confronts the depth he has avoided, and this confrontation, though painful, becomes the very source of his devotion. But here is the paradox. Her power does not come from trying to make him need her. It comes from not needing him. The moment she stops chasing, he starts seeking. The moment she stands firm in her worth, he begins to doubt his own. The polarity shifts. He realizes that her silence teaches him more than her words ever could, and her absence makes him feel her presence more acutely than her constant availability ever did. She becomes the unanswered question in his life, the one riddle he cannot solve, the one mystery he cannot escape. Many women fear that such freedom will drive a man away, and sometimes it does. But those who leave were never capable of meeting her in the first place. They flee not because she is too much, but because she is the mirror of their own lack. Yet those who stay, those who choose to lean into the discomfort, are transformed by it. They discover that their need for her is not weakness, but the call to step into their own maturity. Her sovereignty awakens theirs, if they are willing. In this way, she becomes unforgettable. Not because she gave endlessly, not because she sacrificed herself on the altar of his comfort, but because she dared to hold her shape. Men forget women who dissolve. They never forget the one who remained whole. Even in her absence, she becomes an archetype in his mind, the silent force that compares itself against every woman who follows. He may try to replicate the feeling elsewhere, but he will find it lacking. For the thresholds she embodied are not common, they are rare, sacred and transformative. The Stoics knew that love could never be secure through ownership. To try to possess another is to guarantee loss. True love, they argued, is found in alignment with nature, in allowing freedom, in respecting sovereignty, in cherishing without clinging. The empowered woman lives this truth instinctively. She does not have to recite philosophy. She is the philosophy. Her very existence teaches him what Epictetus wrote centuries ago. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. And in her freedom, she teaches him the real meaning of love. he begins to notice that her allure does not come from performance, but from essence. She does not manipulate, she does not strategize, she does not plead, she simply exists in her power, and that existence alone bends the atmosphere around her. Like fire, she does not chase wood, yet everything that comes near her is transformed by her flame. This is why he needs her not because she fills his emptiness, but because she awakens his fullness. She is not a supplement to his lack, but a summons to his potential. But here is the final irony. Though he feels he cannot live without her, she can live without him. And it is precisely this freedom that ensures he remains bound to her. For when a man realizes that a woman stays not out of fear but out of choice, his reverence deepens. He begins to understand that her presence is a gift, not an obligation. And gifts cannot be demanded, they can only be cherished. So the cycle continues. He resists, he surrenders, he grows, he falters, he returns. Yet always she remains herself, whole, sovereign, untouchable at her core. And in that untouchable essence lies the final threshold. The understanding that she is not his to possess, only his to honor. The moment he sees this, his need becomes devotion, and his devotion becomes love that transcends ownership. He does not cling, he commits. He does not demand, he cherishes. And through her, he becomes more than he was before. For the woman who knows her thresholds never begs to be needed. She embodies the truth that makes her unforgettable, that her love is a gift, her freedom is sacred, and her presence is a fire no man can extinguish. And the man who stands before such a woman, whether trembling or awakened, cannot escape the truth. He does not merely want her, he needs her. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.